I'm John Batchelor. Mary Kissel of the Wall Street Journal's editorial board is here with me. Mary, we're going to move immediately to the dollar and domestic issues, but I want to start with something you've been flagging on TweetDeck. You can follow Mary on TweetDeck very easily. I do, because Mary puts up issues from her 6 years in Asia, and she sees things very quickly, and I follow her story. This is Thailand, and we have breaking news in the last 14 hours out of Bangkok of a brief interruption in television broadcasts sometime Thursday Thailand time. It's now Friday morning. Technical difficulty, but it alarmed everybody. There's said to be jitters because of a coup. What's going on?
Well, the Prime Minister is set to call an election, and surrounding this election are fears of another coup, because there are questions about whether or not the Prime Minister has enough popular support to actually win if an election comes to pass. And that is an outcome that the Army and the monarchy want to see. So the Army chief has also come out, made some statements, and said that he would, of course, support the Prime Minister. So people are really on edge there. They're just waiting to see what's going to happen.
And the reason we care about Thailand, of course, is because it was at one time an integral member of the growth of Southeast Asia. Has it fallen out of favor so much these last years that it's no longer a crisis for the neighboring countries?
But Thailand's a very, very important country. It was an Asian tiger, one of the fast-growing economies, but it's also a very important U.S. ally in Southeast Asia, and the stability of Thailand matters very much to the United States.
I want to move to domestic matters because there was a conference last weekend. This is money news, and our dollar is flimsy, you might notice. A colleague of yours, Mary O'Grady, was in Rio de Janeiro recently, and I talked to her, and she said, "John, do you know what the dollar can buy at a hotel down here? Not very much for $300. So clearly something going on out there with the dollar. We can see it on the trading all the time. The dollar sinks and sinks and sinks. Right. The Wall Street Journal editorial page brought attention to the IMF chief, Dominique Strauss-Kahn, who importantly is a strong likelihood to run for the presidency of France, so pay attention to Mr. Strauss-Kahn. Yes. To endorse capital controls as a necessary tool to be used on a temporary basis. Mary, what is this general understanding that the world government wants to control the flow of dollars? Why are we worrying about this?
Well, the dollar is the world's global currency, whether we like it or not. The vast majority of trade in the world is denominated in U.S. dollars. So whereas the Federal Reserve thinks it just makes monetary policy for the United States, it's not true. It makes it for the rest of the world and for all the countries that use the dollar. So the fact that the dollar is declining in value is creating a lot of havoc, particularly in fast-growing economies like China and Brazil that peg the dollar.
The story is that there is a lot of alarm out there about the flood of dollars that Ben Bernanke has embraced these last years. And QE2 is going to end sometime in June, we believe. That is one of the ways that people who follow money closely just sort of shorthand this flood of money. But it's damaged badly, as I understand, the developing economies already. They see a lot of inflation. And in the Wall Street editorial, it points us back to the 1970s and a quip that was given by a Treasury Secretary once upon a time when we were a much more powerful nation. The dollar is our currency, but your problem. Is that still true, Mary? It's our currency.
Yeah, that is true. You're quoting John Connolly, the Treasury Secretary. There are a lot of complicated ideas in here, but the basic idea is if the Federal Reserve keeps creating dollars, then the value of the dollar is going to decline because there isn't an increasing equal demand for dollars. So the irony here is that it sent countries all over the world scrambling to figure out what to do, and the IMF has jumped into this fray and said, well, guys all around the world, if you want to put up barriers to free flows of capital to protect yourselves, in other words, not to import inflation, go ahead and do that. Well, that's kind of ironic because the IMF was founded to support free trade and to support stable values of money. So This is a real kind of departure for the IMF. But it's an understandable reaction on the part of these countries. What can they do?
To Mr. Bernanke's insistence that he's going to do what's necessary in order to bring our employment down at the same time, goose the GDP. You mentioned in this editorial in the Wall Street Journal is the president's macroeconomic explanation for inflation in the food and fuel. He says that it's speculators. Is that true, Mary?
Yeah.
Now, come on, Mary. All right.
Well, look, let's talk about oil.
Yes.
Oil, you could say, that part of the rise in the price of oil has to be concerns about supply with what's going on in the Middle East. But that cannot explain all of it. You got to say a large part of the rise in the price of oil is the devaluation of the dollar. Oil is priced in dollars, and if the value of the dollar goes down, it buys less oil. So you got to use more dollars to buy the same barrel. And we are starting to see the rise in food and fuel prices really bite the American consumer. You can't ignore it anymore. The only way you can ignore it is if you're not eating and you're not driving.
This is Mary Kissel, and we turn to another editorial I've read recently in the Wall Street Journal, and this is the question of big labor, which is traditionally a Democratic ally, supporting the Obama National Labor Relations Board. This has to do with the company Boeing, which is building the Dreamliner. What's happened, Mary?
Well, the NLRB, which is a sort of Orwellian institution, its leaders are appointed by the president, came out yesterday and they filed a complaint against Boeing. And they said, Boeing is building a plant, a new plant, in South Carolina to build the Dreamliner, and this is anti-union bias. Now, how do you see that as anti-union bias? The only way you can see this as anti-union bias is because South Carolina is a right-to-work state. Boeing is not moving people from its base in Puget Sound.
It's building
a plant. So this has big national implications, people. This is not just a Boeing story. This is an attack on
the federal government.
The
federal government is the NLRB.
That is right. This is an attack on the 22 states that want to compete, right, with everybody else and to draw business to them. So if they win this case, which I don't think they will, but if they did, this has significant implications for the U.S. economy.
Is Boeing backing down?
No, Boeing's going to fight this all the way to the federal courts.
Mary Kissel of the Wall Street Journal's editorial page. Possible coup in Thailand. We flagged that because if we come back next week and tell you it's happened, we get to analyze it very carefully. Mary, thank you very much. I'm John Batchelor. This is The John Batchelor Show.